Nothing to see here. I'm just fixing college football.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth: realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. Getting you ready for the season. We've always got you covered. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Utah's outlook in the Big 12 is good, I think. Is it as good as it is right now? Probably not. Maybe, possibly. We'll talk about that. And the Mountain West preseason media poll loves Boise State, who are going to be a playoff contender. And yeah, I think they're worthy of it. I don't know if the gap is quite as big as everyone thinks. So that's all coming up on today's show. But speaking of a Group of Five conference, I have a solution to I think, appease almost every crowd out there, regardless of where you stand on the concept of a G5 playoff. So this is a notion that I have come around on. Once upon a time, I thought, I don't think you really need to do that. But then I thought about it more. And I thought about what I want to see introduced and what I think could be really good for college football. That does not mean these ideas will gain any traction, because good ideas seldom gain a lot of traction in the college football world nowadays, but allow me to indulge myself anyway. So the Group of Five having their own playoff, I think, makes a great deal of sense. You might have to reduce the number of regular season games. You might have to manipulate things around a little bit and make it look and feel a tad different than it is now. I'm not opposed universally to change. I'm opposed to change when it's not required. I think, though, this would enhance the Group of Five experience, because pretending that schools in Conference USA are capable of playing at the same level if they win their conference as the winner of the SEC is absolute silly buffoonery and nonsense. And so defining success for a team that is in the Group of Five not having a championship, I think, is foolhardy. Because you look at what the FCS does, and if you'd like to incorporate them into this mold, I'd frankly be on board. I don't know if they would go for it necessarily, but they could. They could be open to it. What I am proposing is the national champion of a particular level, in this instance, the Group of Five, should then be promoted up to the power ranks. And this has to follow on the heels of conference consolidation. I'm talking way in the future, after the existing media rights deals expire. The next massive round of realignment, where college football goes to like an AFC, NFC model and then splits up into divisions, that is where I would like to see promotion and relegation instigated, much like they have over in Europe. Far be it from me to come on this show and say, we should try to be more like Europe with our sports, because they play for ties over there. I mean, that got Greg Berhalter fired. So what do you need? That's all you need to know. And I think the promotion relegation model can add a lot of interest and intrigue and clarity to the Group of Five ranks. Because if you have a Group of Five playoff and you make it, a selective playoff, it's not, one of these FCS level, like 24 team playoffs or anything like that. But if the best teams have the chance to play out a postseason structure in which the winner gets elevated into the Power Four, and then a team that finishes in last place, you can debate in the YouTube comments, or you can shoot me a note for all your ideas about how to determine, what team gets relegated down to the Group of Five ranks. But I wouldn't be opposed to that either, because that adds a lot of incentive to the end of seasons for teams that are having bad years. And it also punishes programs that don't have the right coaches or are not making the necessary investments, and rewards those that do and have successful seasons. So if the Group of Five had their own playoff and the champion every year got promoted up to the Power Four, that sort of structure, I think, could thrive in the college football space, because we have a tendency as a country to watch football no matter what. Even if there is a perception or a narrative, people don't watch bowl games, they don't watch X, Y, and Z. Yeah, the numbers say differently, and these entities still exist because they do make money. Because a bowl game that no one cares about, as casuals might say, will still get 1 million people or so to watch. You know how much money you can make in advertising on television? If you got 1 million people watching, you can do pretty well. You can do pretty darn well. So if you then created a structure in which the stakes are elevated and you provide a clear path for those group of 5 schools to get into the power ranks, who loses there? Who loses? You tell me, because I don't see anybody that loses. So that's my dream world. You would have a power 2 conference, or 2 power conferences like the AFC and NFC. Is that my preferred outcome for college football? No. But is it a realistic one in the future? And is it making the best of the landscape that we have created that is kind of a chaotic mess? I 100% think so. If you go to that model one day, and then once you have that structure, you create a relegation and promotion system that involves the group of 5 playoff. And if you want to do this at the group of 5 level, going down to the FCS, I'm on board with that too. The FCS national champion not only gets to declare themselves the national champions because they, will have earned that title, but they get to then play at a higher level of college football where there's more money involved and where there's more prestige for your program. What is that doing but adding urgency to the games that are being played on the field? And then at the other end of the spectrum, teams that are 2-10 could battle it out. And you say, well, hey, this game ordinarily between a couple of 2-9 teams wouldn't mean anything, but the loser going down a level and taking a financial hit in their athletic department, I tell you what, that can be a tricky element to make all of this work. But boy, would it be exciting. You cannot argue that. That would be riveting. You'd watch. How else would you get normal college football fans, or even diehards like myself, or many of you out there, to watch a game between 2 teams that are bottom dwellers? How else do you make it exciting? You raise the stakes. You put some stakes in there. So I would love for there to be distinct playoffs for every level where the national champions are promoted to the next level, where the incentive is more than just a feeling of accomplishment. Because the other thing that this could do, where you would have teams, one team go up and one team go down every single year, is you can't have the same team. If, let's just say as an example, Boise State wins the first ever group of 5 playoff, well, they're then into the Power 4 ranks. They've earned their way to get there. And the next year, it's going to be somebody else. Somebody else is going to win that group of 5 championship, and you just keep flipping. Now, the number of logistical hurdles that this idea of mine faces are too numerous to lay out in this particular segment because the finances get really tough. The television contracts would be complicated. You'd have to have the will and desire for this. But within the world of college football, the only thing, and I mean the only thing, in addition to massive support and big crowds, that European soccer can show college football, it feels gross just to say it, but it's true. Promotion and relegation, I think, can add a lot to the product that we as consumers get to enjoy. If you don't agree, let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Because here's the pushback I get. The group of 5 should have access to a national championship. Well, I don't think you can ever get there. But you can't say you wouldn't have access. Because if you win a G5 championship and you get promoted up to the Power 4 ranks, then guess what happens? You're now playing in the leagues that play for the national championship at the highest level. All right, I'm done. Let me know your thoughts. I have thoughts on Utah because I don't know if their window to win a Big 12 championship extends beyond this year. That's coming up next. Before we get to Utah, let's get to eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. That easy. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. What is Utah's long-term outlook in the Big 12 since Kyle Whittingham and Cam Rising will soon be gone? That's JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes joining me. Do you feel like Utah can stay as a perennial conference title contender once the two stalwarts of their program and their conference championship contending and winning era both depart?
I definitely do. I mean, if you look back at what Utah has done, you have someone like Tyler Huntley, who was successful before Cam Rising. You have a 4-star in Isaac Wilson, who will hopefully be successful, but I feel like they could recruit other quarterbacks. The bigger loss is obviously Kyle Whittingham, who has been everything for this Utah football program, guided them through unprecedented heights. I mean, he has been on staff at Utah through 4 conference changes. That's hard to believe. So he's gone through a lot, but he's led Utah to back-to-back Pac-12 championships, those Rose Bowl appearances, and, hopefully this fall, a Big 12 championship. And that's a lot to replace. But Morgan Scalley is clearly the guy. He's been Kyle Whittingham's number one guy for a long time. He's been the head coach in waiting for a while. Yes, there was a controversy, but it felt like things would eventually get back to Morgan Scalley because of the way his former players spoke about him. He's a leader and a guy who's going to keep the culture in place. I would be really concerned about Kyle Whittingham leaving if Utah was then going to make an outside hire. But because of how involved Morgan Scalley is in Utah's recruiting efforts, some of the top recruits that Utah's brought in have been because of Morgan Scalley's effort. He's a natural leader and someone that I do believe is the right choice to lead Utah into their next era. I think Utah will drop off a little bit next year because of what we said. No Cam Rising. Utah, in the transition from Tyler Huntley to Cam Rising, had Jake Bentley in there during the COVID-shortened season. Even without COVID, I don't think that would have been Utah's best team. They lost some games. There was some bumps along the way. And I think next year, because they are losing a lot of players who were even a part of the first championship team back in 2021. So when you're losing that type of veteran presence, there's going to be some regression. But I do believe Utah will get back to being one of the teams in the Big 12 because of how much I believe in Morgan Scalley. He's one of the top defensive minds in college football. You can go back to what he's done against Caleb Williams. It's the reason that USC then tried to hire him this last offseason, in which Utah then made him their head coach in waiting a little bit before that got underway. So he's an elite defensive mind. The defense is going to stay on top. The culture will stay in place. The recruiting will stay in place. I believe Utah will still remain one of the 20 best current teams in the college football landscape.
If you are correct and Scalley is able to make it more of, a Marcus Freeman transition or Ryan Day at Ohio State, then say, Mississippi State's handoff did not go particularly well. There have been some other examples too. They're trying to be more like a David Shaw at Stanford at the beginning rather than at the end. If you're right, 2025 is going to feel like a big opportunity for the rest of the Big 12. Because let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Utah is going to continue being the same program after 2025, and there will be kind of an adjustment year, and he gets the feel for being a head coach and whatnot. That team, without those leaders and without Kyle Whittingham potentially, that's going to be the most gettable Utah might be for a while. But on the recruiting trail and the talent acquisition with the transfer portal writ large for Morgan Scalley, is Utah going to be able to field, you think, a continually top 3 to 4 roster in the Big 12?
I believe so. I just think the culture that they have, and the biggest thing for Utah has never been 24/7 recruiting class rankings. It's the job they've done developing the guys they bring in. No one knew who Brant Keithy was before he arrived at Utah. He was a 2-star. So was Devin Lloyd. He wasn't even a linebacker. There are tons of examples. How about Jaquindon Jackson? He's not at Utah anymore because of how good he was at running back, and then got an NIL deal at Arkansas. So Utah's development is phenomenal. Utah does a better job of retaining coaches than pretty much any team in the country. I mean, they have lost a receiver coach and a running back coach, and that's pretty much it over the years. Andy Ludwig has been at Utah for a while. He even, stayed at Utah over Notre Dame, and there were some contract things there, but still they were able to hold on to their offensive coordinator, Jim Harding, Sharif Shaw. These guys have been their offensive line and DB coach, those two names. They've been there a very long time. And they are the ones who are directly involved in their positions. I always talk about with the Utah secondary, even though they turn over a lot, and Sharif Shaw and Morgan Scalley we trust, because it seems like whoever Utah puts back there, they produce extremely well because of all the coaches I expect to remain, I still think Utah is going to put out a strong Big 12 roster because, yes, they won't blow you away by bringing in the most 4 stars. Like Deion Sanders in Colorado, they're going to bring in more 4 and 5 stars, but Utah brings in the guys that fit their program, and they've continually done that. And Rice-Eccles Stadium, no matter what happens with the recruits and everything you bring in, Utah's still going to have one of the best home field advantages in the conference, and that's something that's going to make it very hard because each year, at most, Utah's probably going to lose 1 game at home, depending on their home conference schedule, because the altitude coupled with the noise level, it's just one of the toughest environments in college football, despite what EA Sports may tell you.
Or Dan Lanning. I think I think for Utah, it gives me now, and also I made a statement, earlier in this segment, assuming Kyle Whittingham won't be there in 2025. That's my guess. I think you announce a head coach in waiting at this stage because this is Kyle Whittingham's last hurrah. Cam Rising, if he is truly done after this year, and Keithy and whatnot, and the reset that would take place, it would feel like a natural jumping off point for a guy who's been in Salt Lake City for the last 2 decades as the football coach. Does that reality that 2025 is going to be a regression year, probably temporary, but we'll have to wait and see. And we'll definitely talk about it on the show at the time. But does that make the pressure on winning big in 2024 intensify for this Utes program?
I do think it does, because I think if, let's say Utah, things just went really bad. Let's say they had another 8-4 campaign, which is hard to fathom. But if they did, it's another step back. You're expected to win the Big 12, and then you don't. I think that would be something where you're not as strong as you used to be as a program. You don't have that same head coach in place. I think you could see a little regression then. I still expect Utah. I don't expect Utah to lose 4 games, so I think they're going to live up to the hype. Spencer, we've talked about it before on your show. This schedule lines up incredibly favorably for Utah. They missed Kansas and very well. Kansas State in the regular season, and I know they go to Oklahoma State. Their toughest game by far. They could very well lose it. This is a team with a top 5 rush defense last year. Pretty much everyone is back, so I do think they match up well with Ollie Gordon and Oklahoma State overall in that regard. But I do think there's pressure on to win this year, to continue to ascend the brand, make sure you remain in a strong standing, knowing you're going to lose so much and you have to replace them. Some of that will come through the transfer portal, but this is a Utah team that still has built its culture by the recruits they bring in and the players they raise up from within and teach them this is the way you have to come in and fit our program. When you only bring in transfers, that could sometimes be too many individual agendas. I think Colorado's learned that a little bit last year, where I think that's what I like about Utah is that they bring in these guys that understand the recruits that come in, that this is how we play. If you want to play, you got to play this way. So then when the transfers come in, there's our smaller voices. They're like, okay, I got to buy in. Like, it's not a lot of individual voices when you arrive. It's a united voice with this Utah team. That goes back to Morgan Scalley carrying that united voice. But getting back to 2024, it's a big pivotal year. I mean, Kyle Whittingham is straight up talking about that he's probably not going to be here in 2027. They just named the head coach in waiting. He's going to turn 65 in November. He said it himself, he probably won't coach past 65. I think the writing is more than on the walls that it's going to be his last season at Utah, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think despite the transition to the Big 12, their schedule, as you said, works out really well. And when on that note specifically, the missing of both Kansas schools and then the next best odds team that you play that's kind of, arguably your toughest Big 12 game is Oklahoma State. Look, Oklahoma State is like Utah, high floor program. They don't bottom out. They also don't always hit the ceiling that a lot of people might think. I know they went to the Big 12 championship game a year ago. I do not expect them to get back there this year. Ollie Gordon will be playing. Why don't I just leave it at that? And Mike Gundy will be, coaching in the game. But man, that's a big quarterback advantage for the toughest game that Utah has in their conference slate. Like Alan Bowman and Cam Rising, this is night and day for me. So I'm with you that real tangible pressure on Utah here. We talked about this all the way back in January that there's pressure on them to make it. But with the Whittingham factor, I think it is really just ratcheted up, and I think they're capable of getting to that level, but certainly this feels like the year, and it'll be a couple seasons at least before Utah can talk about expecting to win a conference championship again. JT Wistrcill, Locked On Utes. Appreciate the time as always.
Great as going on as always, Spencer. Thank you.
Speaking of conference favorites, over in the Mountain West, which could very well send a team to the playoff, Boise State is a colossal favorite. Should they be? We'll talk about that one next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, that's probably obvious, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets any time that I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most out of your summer, and you can get everything you want for college football over there. Over-unders, you can get conference title odds, you can get national championship odds, everything you want, individual games, it's all over at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The sky is blue, the sun is hot, water makes things wet, water itself is not wet, and Boise State is picked as the preseason media favorite to win the Mountain West. So this doesn't come as a major surprise after they surged at the end of last year and won the Mountain West after firing their coach mid-season. Like, that had to feel a little demoralizing for the rest of the conference, didn't it? That here's a great opportunity to get a real shot at a team that has won more Mountain West championships than other schools would probably like to have be the reality. And then they have to fire their coach. It's going so poorly. And then the new guy who was already on their staff just wins the Mountain West. Well, that's what Boise State did last year. Couple of things on their preseason favoritism. Number one, I don't know that it should be so substantial. Should they be the favorites? Would they be my pick? Yes. See how I'm kind of hesitating there? Like, my answer is yes. Boise State, preseason Mountain West favorite. I am on board with that notion. They got all but 4 preseason first place votes. The next team was UNLV. You want to talk about coaches that are primed to elevate themselves in the next coaching carousel? If UNLV has the sort of season that a lot of people might expect them to, then Barry Odom is probably not going to be in Las Vegas for much longer. And then Brennan Marion, the highly regarded and uniquely creative offensive coordinator, might find himself as the head coach of UNLV, or maybe he goes with Barry Odom somewhere. But that is definitely something that is a storyline to watch for as UNLV's season plays out. Now, if they go 7-5, then that's a little bit less so. But if they end the year 9-3, if they have a Power 4 win on their resume this year and they push for a Mountain West Conference title, hey, crazier things have happened before. But I look at Boise State, and the returning production metric doesn't blow you away. And their transfer portal class is not actually very extensive. Their recruiting class is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing exceptional about it. It's just, it's pretty standard run-of-the-mill Boise State recruiting class for the most part. And so then you think, well, on paper, what gives Boise State a massive advantage over everybody else? And the answer lies in their backfield. This is a high-end, capable Power 4 starting backfield. Ashton Jeanty, keeping Ashton Jeanty should be considered a portal addition almost, because when you look at the talent acquisition metrics that a site like 24/7 Sports uses, they're not taking into account guys who could have left but decided to stay. Right? That's where the returning production metric comes into play. And certainly Ashton Jeanty is just one player, but they've got, I think, decent chance, more than a decent chance perhaps, to be the best backfield in the Mountain West. So if Spencer Danielson continues to succeed as he did a year ago, and if Malachi Nelson hits anywhere near what his potential is, and he's learned from Lincoln Riley, so certainly he understands football decently well. He hasn't thrown a hefty number of passes in a college football game yet. That's the big question mark. And another reason why I kind of hesitate on Boise State being this huge, colossal favorite. But that backfield could succeed. That is a better backfield than a lot of Power 4 schools across the country. I mean, Malachi Nelson, big-time blue-chip 5-star quarterback recruit, and Ashton Jeanty was fielding NIL and transfer portal offers and ultimately decided to stay at Boise State. He was a part of a uniform reveal that I thought looked pretty darn slick and excellent. So the next team that I want to talk about is one that I mentioned, UNLV. So if I asked you right now, who has the best according to 24/7 Sports, transfer portal class in 2024 in the Mountain West. Would you guess UNLV? Probably not. But the number of players they are having drop down from the Power 4 ranks, they've also added a guy in Cyrus Webster to the backfield who I have called at the FCS level. I've done play-by-play while he was on the field, and that dude's a football player. That is an absolute dynamite football player. I think that is a really, really under the radar addition for the Rebels there. I said Cyrus Webster, and I meant to say Kylan James. I was thinking of a different guy who played at Utah Tech, but Kylan James is the name that I'm thinking of there. He came from Central Arkansas. I have seen him run the football. That guy can be a really, really nice piece in the backfield. But UNLV's transfer portal class is a testament to the job that Barry Odom and his staff have done down there in Las Vegas, revitalizing what has been an incredibly dormant, untapped potential sort of program. And they've got a pretty strong recruiting base there in Las Vegas. You see blue chip guys coming out of there at high schools like Bishop Gorman and Liberty essentially every year. This has not been an easy job. You go look at the last 20 years in UNLV football, it's been bad, terrible. The wrong hires, guys that didn't work out. They tried Marcus Arroyo from Oregon. That wasn't great. Bobby Houck from Montana. No, he didn't work once he left Big Sky Country. And suddenly they bring in Barry Odom, and it's starting to move in the right direction. Now, they have a quarterback change since Jaden Maiava kind of curiously went to USC. That's one of those quarterback transfers I understand, but I also don't fully understand. It's not as if you're playing at UNLV, you can't get drafted in the NFL. If that's your goal and you had the starting quarterback job, and look, maybe he knew internally something that we do not, like he wasn't going to be the starter, but gosh, I watched him last year and he looked pretty darn good. So UNLV has a preseason win total of 7.5, and they're receiving the second most votes in the Mountain West preseason media poll to win the conference. And the reason I talk about this on today's show is to once again remind my everydayers or any new listeners out there that a group of 5 team is going to make the playoff. And I think the likelihood that that group of 5 team comes from either the Mountain West, the American, or the Sun Belt is 90+%. I think Liberty's good. I talked about them earlier this week on the show, though. They have such a weak schedule. They'd have to go undefeated again. And can you win 26 consecutive games against non-Power 4 opponents? Look, Liberty's got a good quarterback. They have got a good coach. They're going to be the favorites to win Conference USA, and they'll have a chance to make the playoff as the Group of 5 team. But that's asking a lot because that's what they'll have to do. They were 13-0 last year. Then they went into the Fiesta Bowl, and Oregon beat them 45-6. And now they go back, and they play an incredibly weak schedule with not a single Power 4 team on it. If they run the table, they'll be in consideration. I think even one loss could deprive them of the opportunity, and frankly, I think it should, because they do not have a strong schedule, and Conference USA is not on the same level as the Mountain West or the American. So Boise State being the preseason favorite makes a good deal of sense. I just don't know that the gap is as wide as that poll indicates. I think that is a pick on Spencer Danielson and the momentum he had at the end of last year. And that's frankly another question in addition to quarterback. I don't question Ashton Genty. That guy can do everything. That is an NFL football player. I would take him on my NFL team. I'm a Seahawks fan, and I mean, we don't need running backs. But if we did, I would draft Ashton Genty in the 3rd round, and I'd feel exceptional having him as an early kind of number 2 back in his career, and then moving to be a number 1 back as time progresses there. So I like the upside of the backfield. I just don't know. Now, UNLV has got a more experienced quarterback compared to Malachi Nelson, but is he as talented? We'll see. We'll see. And Boise State will get an early test. The second week of the season, they go to Eugene, and they play Oregon. That's a national title contender. If Boise State goes into Autzen and plays Oregon closer than they are comfortable, and Boise State has been a thorn in Oregon's side for a very, very long time, if they go in and make that game closer than it perhaps should be, than the betting line might indicate, we don't know what the line is, then Boise State may very well be worthy of being such a massive favorite. They have a plus, it was 125 last I looked for Boise State to win the Mountain West, which for conference championship odds, pretty crazy. I mean, that is pretty darn crazy. It's 120, plus 120. And then you've got Fresno State and UNLV in there. So I think Fresno could absolutely be solid. I trust Jeff Tedford. I think UNLV is really, really intriguing with the roster and the program momentum that they have. I'd pick Boise State as the favorite. I just don't know if it should be viewed as a Grand Canyon-sized gap between them and the next team, and therefore a team that pushes for the college football playoff this year. I think the Mountain West has a great chance to get into the playoff this season. You probably need a team that has 2 losses or fewer. Could any of those teams do it? Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me. If you tell me right now, Boise State, Fresno State, or UNLV end the year 11-2, I would not be shocked. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.